My name is Deborah Bond-Upson, and I'm with Parents for Public Schools in Hawaii. And we are very lucky today to be joined by our founding president, Lois Yamauchi, who has led many of these middle school Untangling Adolescence webinars and seminars in person at schools all over our islands. And also today, her husband, Tracy Trevino, is with us. And he also has been presenting for us for years. And so today we have the unique experience of both of them, which is really great. I wanted to just introduce myself. I'm the current president. Now we can see Tracy coming in ghostly with our background. Just lean forward a little bit, Tracy, and then you'll stay in focus. Good, good. And we also have a few of our board members on this call and coordinators, and I'd like to just introduce them for a moment. I have brought my 4 kids all through public school. It's been very important to me that public schools offer everything our children need to realize their gifts, whoever they are and whatever their gifts are. And I've also had 3 foster kids in the public school system here in Hawaii, which has taught me a lot more about what's needed and what's going on. We're very interested in hearing all of your concerns and all the things you love about public schools. And if you can add it in the chat as we go, that would be great. So please, everyone, do add your name and school and interests in the chat as we go forward. And later in the talk, we'll put a link up where you can do an evaluation of this talk. And we'll also put a link up where you can join Parents for Public Schools, which is free to join. And we'd love to have you all join because it's a way that you can tell us what your concerns are and we can advocate for you and your kids. Wendy, our last year's president and very important in our organization, would you introduce yourself? Can you unmute?
Sure. Thank you, Deborah. It's so good to be here. I'm so glad that everyone was able to join us and take the time out on a probably busy Saturday afternoon for most of you. So we appreciate you being here. I'm Wendy Nakasoni Kalani, board member for PPS of Hawaii. I have a junior at Mililani High School. And then I also have foster kiddos from time to time. I live in Wahiwa, so they would attend Ka'ala Elementary, Wahiwa Middle, and or Lelehua High School. My experience with the Hawaii Department of Education is mostly with the Central District of Oahu, but I'm looking forward to working more with island schools statewide. Thanks again. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you. Kashmira Reed, longtime board member of Parents for Public Schools. Will you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kashmira or Cash. I mentioned in the chat that I have 2 young adult children. We were at Waikele, and we were in the Waikele area, so they attended Waikele Elementary, and then just a combination of different private and public schools for my daughter, but my son did attend Roosevelt High School and Stevenson Middle School. That was a great experience, but thank you, everyone, for being on the webinar. Mahalo.
Thank you. And Margaret, you're in the background. I know your camera's not on, but can you say hello? Margaret is our very important coordinator who many of you will meet in social media and our newsletter. Margaret, can you say hello?
Hi there. Apologies. I'm at a robotics tournament over at Aliumanu Middle School at the moment. My daughter goes to Stevenson and my son goes to Manoa Elementary. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks, Margaret. And Jessica Lau is our new middle school coordinator and just joining us for the first time in this meeting. Jessica, please introduce yourself.
Yes, hi everyone. Yes, my name is Jessica. I'm currently a UH Manoa student. I'm doing my master's in educational psychology. But I did my undergrad in psych and human development and family studies. So I'm really excited to work with Parents for Public Schools. Of myself, I went to Kalani High School and yeah, I just joined. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can best support you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. I think that's the totality of the board members who are on this call. So now I'm going to ask Tracy and Lois to introduce themselves and to begin the program. And just to remind you, please enter your names and your interests, your kids' schools in the chat as we go forward. Also, enter any questions or concerns you have we'll be keeping track of them and bringing them up to Tracy and Lois as they make a few pauses in the presentation to answer questions. Lois and Tracy, will you take it over?
Sorry, I didn't unmute. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for coming. As Deborah mentioned earlier, I am formerly the founding president of Parents for Public Schools, came to this work through the Furlough Friday protests at the governor's office, and have been trying to advocate for public school families. I'm also a developmental psychologist and work in the Department of Educational Psychology. So that's my day job. And Tracy and I have two emerging adults, I would say emerging adult sons who went through the public schools.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see this level of enthusiasm for this topic, and we're really happy to be able to see if our presentations can be helpful for you. Yeah, as Lois was saying, we have two semi-adult, emerging adult kids went through the school system. So my full-time job used to be being their dad, but now I'm sort of reduced to a consulting advisory capacity. My other job is at Chaminade, where I'm a professor of psychology and I'm a clinical psychologist. So I'll be bringing some of that to today's talk, and specifically more brain sciencey stuff and stuff about sleep. Okay.
So here is our title of our presentation, Untangling Adolescence, Middle and Intermediate School Transition. So we recall, although it was now a while ago, when we were experiencing our children transitioning from elementary to middle school, that we had a lot of questions in our minds, and our friends were asking us, and we were thinking about things. So these are some questions that have come up for different family members. What's changing now, and what are the challenges? What's a challenge for the kids as well as for the parents or family members? You know, are all the changes going to happen in the same way for every kid? And, you know, and I think ultimately we all want to support our children in the ways that we can. What's the best way that we can support our kids? So we're going to go through different changes that psychologists, so both of us are psychologists, have studied how kids are changing at this point in their lives. And we'll pause the presentation at different points to ask for questions, but you can go ahead and write in your comments and chat in the chat and questions. And when we pause, then somebody will read some of the questions. So change is constant. We know that with our kids, change is the most children are experiencing change. We're always experiencing change as people, but adults, we may not notice our changes as much as we do our children's change. And so you may recall when your child was born, you know, what they were like. And then a month later, when you were going for that month checkup, wow, they're so different. They've gained so much in their ability to master different their movements and so forth. So as psychologists, we look at how change exists across the lifespan. And today we're going to talk about the changes mainly in early adolescence. So as developmental psychologists, we usually say that the times in which change happens the most or is most evident is with young children, adolescents, and then older adults. So we're going to focus on early adolescence today. Psychologists have divided childhood into different stages, and it's just a way that we see changes happening. And so you could recall your child as a toddler, And then when they enter school, or when they're a kind of schooling, maybe preschool to early childhood education, that they're kind of different in that way. And then they're moving into middle childhood. So the older elementary grades seem quite different from kindergarten, right? The fourth and fifth graders are quite different. And then we begin to see that really a lot of changes happening as they're moving into young adolescence and into middle school. So it kind of coincides with this change in schooling.
I am moving in like a Harry Potter ghost here. Yeah, so I really like this image of the bread being folded, because in many ways we have discrete, separate sort of paths of development, physical ways of thinking, social life, or emotional well-being. And they're all growing together, and they're all interacting and affecting each other. So it's kind of it's important to consider each of these different dimensions of growth and then how they affect each other. So obviously we have body changes, and with puberty, there's just a tremendous explosion of growth, because a lot of growth hormone gets produced during adolescence, and that emergence of growth hormone has sexual development occurs. So as we're all aware, the girls are a little ahead of the boys in terms of their sexual maturity, and sort of the external sexual characteristics change as well as the internal ones. And so our kids are becoming sexually mature. And so this is quite challenging. And of course, it can happen in ways that aren't always the same for each kid. So normally these kind of changes are relatively smooth, I would say, but we have kids that start off with they might be early in these changes, and some kids might be lagging a little bit behind. Everybody goes through the same phases, of course, but different times. So for kids, sometimes they can become self-conscious about this. If they're early to change, or they're late to change, they might feel like they're a little bit out of sequence or something, and more self-conscious. And with that, of course, there's a lot of stuff about the brain that allows kids to be more self-conscious. So that's just something to be aware of. It's completely normal to have these changes and have this sort of increased self-consciousness. Oops. So is it advancing? No, not advancing. How is that? Okay. So questions about body changes. I wonder if we have any that you've typed in that we could address, Lois or myself.
Not yet, Tracy.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, and then we'll go
We
into
do
breaks.
have a couple of others that are quite different. So maybe
Okay.
when we get to a pausing point or at the end, we can go over those. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. That's working. Okay, good. Yeah, so you would think with this explosion of growth that the brain would grow a lot. And actually, oddly enough, that's not the case. The brain grows subtly in terms of size, but what's really happening is the brain becomes more sophisticated. Parts of the brain are learning how to do things in cleverer ways, and it's organizing itself so it can be more efficient. And so instead of growing in size so much, it's growing in complexity and its ability to process information. Something called myelination is happening in the neurons in the brain that allows kind of like the CP unit, if you want to think of the brain like that, to go up as a whole stage in terms of its ability to process information. So neural pruning occurs where you actually have a reinforcement of areas in the brain that allow your kid to be getting increasingly good at doing stuff. Now, it might be language stuff, or sports stuff, or computational stuff, or whatever they're getting engaged in that sort of reinforces and uses those brain parts becomes myelinated and preserved, while other neuron groups kind of fade away. So your child's brain is it's really a fantastic period, because it's really becoming the brain that they will have as adults and for the rest of their lives. So the skills and the capacities and the nature of the way they think, it's really being formed around this period. So your school knows this. Middle school curriculums are very much aware of how your child's brain is able to process things differently, and how important it is for your kid to be exposed to a broad range of different experiences. So that allows us all, especially parents, to be mindful of this, of what your child sort of focuses on and likes to do. And so that eventually, encourages us to be increasingly engaged in those activities, and they develop those skills around that. So it's very important for your child, I think, to be exposed to a broad range of different activities, mental tasks, social tasks, physical tasks, to see, how they're responding to that. And so that's why the curriculum in a middle school is so much broader than in the primary school or elementary school. And after school programs exist, which are, I think, a really great thing to have. So hopefully your school is connected to after school programs and your kid can get involved in robotics or chess club or sports or music. Now the brain develops unevenly. It's not like the brain sort of just gets a little bit incrementally better over each year or something. It's kind of uneven. As Lois was saying, there's tremendous burst of brain growth rather in early childhood, and then during adolescence, of course, it's developing. But so we have this tendency to have areas which are quite well developed, movement and language and visual spatial skills or whatever. But what's the last part of the brain to develop, and it's one of the slower organs in the brain, of the body to develop, is the brain, and the frontal lobes of the brain specifically. And the frontal lobes of the brain, it's the kind of the front part of the cortex of the brain, is the part of the brain that has a lot to do with higher order thinking and self-awareness and judgment. And so there's consequences that part of the brain isn't as developed as, say, other areas of the brain, such as, say, your emotional processing. So the consequences for that are quite significant. And I think as parents, we should be aware of this, that our kids have a kind of a disjointed sort ofness where, say, their emotional systems are working quite well and they have a full range of emotional responses, but they may not have the judgment about them. So there's going to be a delay, if you like, in their frontal lobe development. And so you can see kids who have knowledge about things, but they kind of don't have the judgment to know to do with that knowledge. They might be very good at spelling bees or geography bees, but they may not be so good about how to negotiate conflicts interpersonally or emotional experiences. They might think that because the boy didn't text them back, their world has come to an end, or they didn't get invited to a party or something. It's incredibly traumatic, and likely to have the emotional experience of that without realizing it's really not that significant. So another way this kind of manifests is with risk taking. And of course, as parents, we're very concerned about how our kids are making decisions about things that might affect them in terms of their risks, their health, exposure to drugs and peer pressure and all those things, jumping off a cliff without seeing how deep the water is. So it's very important that, so we're mindful of that. And in some ways, as parents, we invite ourselves to be a bit more of the frontal lobes, if you like, of our kids, so that they can get some checks and get some feedback and we have some limits that we might set. Now, I'm a sleep researcher. I'm constantly focusing on sleep, and I think as an American society, we tend to underestimate the importance of good sleep for our kids. We do that in the school system, where we ask kids to go to school too early and we interrupt their sleep routines. And sleep is so important to growth and development of our kids and learning as well. So all these things kind of are related to how well our kids sleep. So when we sleep, us included, we don't just have kind of a dimming of a switch or something. We have specific stages of sleep that we need to get to have certain healthy processes occur. Now, growth hormone only gets excreted during sleep. So it's important to get good sleep so you can grow. That's very obvious. And then we have different cycles within sleep that are connected to mental processes, like allowing ourselves to be able to consolidate learning and to be able to appreciate and have restfulness as well, so that when we wake up in the morning and we go to school, that we're not fatigued. So sleep is important for those reasons. This other slide here just talks about just addresses the sleep stages. What happens when we wake our kids up too early is they lose out on some REM sleep, some dreaming sleep, and that's when we consolidate complex learning. And so it's very important, I think, that we try to give our kids the possibility of having a full night's sleep. Now, what we're doing in the States frequently is we're systematically depriving our kids of enough sleep during the week, and they end up catching up during the weekend, so to speak. Although you can't really have 5 days of bad sleep and say, okay, it's fine because we catch up on the weekend. That doesn't work that way. But we will find that our kids want to sleep in on a Saturday morning, and that's fine. And they typically have, breakfast around lunchtime on Saturday. And then Sunday, they're kind of a little bit out of cycle, so they might have a hard time falling asleep. So my quick tip on that, by the way, is to get your kids to be very active on a Sunday afternoon so they have some sleep pressure to fall asleep that night. And then Monday morning, maybe they'll be, have a more restful night's sleep so that they'll be okay. But it's very typical for kids in the States to be kind of groggy on the Monday morning. Okay. So that's the end of my part about the biology of the brain and the changes there, and about sleep and how that relates to growth and learning. So we'll pause here maybe and find out if there's questions about that Lois or I could field.
Yes, we do have two actually, questions in the chat. So,
Great.
one from Janet. She has said that with increased academic requirements, many kids stay up late to finish
Yeah.
homework.
Yeah.
Are there thoughts on how best to balance academic requirements with sleep?
Yeah, and then that's really quite regretful. It seems a little bit counter helpful actually to have kids stay up late at night getting all their homework done, because they're going to short their amount of total sleep time, and they need the amount of total sleep time, to be able to consolidate learning. So ironically, by staying up late, even if you're doing your homework or something, you're actually kind of sabotaging your ability to learn. So that's unfortunate, and I think other countries do have a little bit more of a measured way of providing homework. So homework should, if we can schedule that earlier in the day, that would be best. So we could have just a very specific time to fall asleep, or to at least attempt sleep, would be good. One thing I forgot to mention was there tends to be a phase delay in the starting of sleep. So as our kids are adolescents, puberty sets in, they tend to want to go to bed later and wake up later. And that's completely normal. It's not but we don't really accommodate that with the school system. So there's no easy answer with that. But the second question is about sleep, is it, or?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for answering the first one. Yes, we have a great question by Wendy. How many hours of sleep should teens get?
Right. For adults, it's, I'd say it's 7 hours plus or minus one would be about right. But for kids in the teen years, I think it's closer to 9 to 11. So I know that frequently that's not being met, but that would be the ideal. That's what's recommended by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. But any other questions about?
The other questions, Tracy, we've been having relate to other issues I think you'll be talking about later, but I'll just mention them in case it's helpful for you to bear them in mind as we go. One of them is what can parents do to help with bullying that children may be experiencing?
Yeah. Lois is going to be addressing it in just a bit. Yeah.
And another one is what do we do with the increasing suicidal ideation that can be happening?
I'll be addressing it. Yeah.
Also, sexual identities. Is there more happening in schools about this, and how can we support children in these areas?
Questions.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Tracy, there was one additional last question regarding sleep and brain development.
Mhm.
Is darkness important for high quality adolescent sleep?
Yeah, it's
Also,
a great question.
is noise disruptive for adolescent sleep? Thank you.
Absolutely. It is for everybody. So what we want for sleep is we want a dark, cool, and quiet environment. So all of those things will help. There's a lot of things that can help sleep that we can control. And just knowing more about what's normal for sleep is one thing, but also setting up our environment for that, as well as avoiding stimulants, and too much activity, physical activity right before bed. Figuring out how to decrease worry around, bedtime, and building a sleep routine is good. So frequently you hear this term sleep hygiene, and you can look that up on the Google sphere, and there'll be clear guidelines on what you can do to promote sleep. Even though you can't force yourself to sleep, you can at least set up the environment to be most conducive of it. Okay, good. I think we'll pass it on to Lois now.
And I just wanted to mention one more thing about the first question about, you know, the balance between the academics and sleeping. And I think, you know, we also came across that with our kids, and we just said, you know, sleep is important, so you're just going to go to sleep. We're not going to get caught up in the expectations of you're not doing all-nighters, and that's just not going to happen. So we set the culture at our home. And also we communicated this with our schools. So I think parents can be advocates. And if you need help, the parents of public schools and the schools, excuse me, the parents around you. So your school community council could be a place where you go in and talk to the educators about there's just too much homework, that this is jeopardizing our kids' learning because of the sleep. So I think there is this misconception that educators may have that in order for kids to learn more, we have to give more homework, and that's not to the not sacrificing kids' good sleep. So I think these are places where parents can advocate for their kids, and it's something that you could do together with groups of people to go in and talk to the administration and talk to the teachers and say, we're concerned about this. Okay, so we're going to move on to thinking. So Tracy talked a lot about the brain, and of course the brain controls everything, and including our thinking. So as our children's brains are developing, their ways of thinking also is developing. So the adolescent mind is not just being able to do more and you know, process more information, but it's actually different. So you'll probably already seeing that your child is able to now think in more abstract ways. And this is a good thing in that they can be more critical thinkers. And it's something that we strive for in our schools and in general, I would say in our community at large. So abstractions are now going to become a part of your child's mental life. They can think about truth and justice. We see adolescents now standing up for, you know, equal rights or human rights. They're beginning to see the difference between rules and laws and what's right and wrong. So they are perhaps if your family is a spiritual family, you may see that your child is becoming more spiritual, and religions often take that into consideration. So young adolescents often have a different role in their spiritual communities. They're able now to plan for the future. And so your teachers in middle school are going to start talking about what kind of person do you want to be? And you should be talking to your kids about what kind of person they might want to be and what they'd like to do in the future. And they can imagine the kind of person that they will become. With this critical thinking and new awareness, self-awareness and social awareness, because they're starting to see what other people are like, their world is opening. They begin to think about their thinking, and they think about what other people are thinking about them. And they may have ideals, realize that there are ideals in our world that are not being met, and they may begin to criticize society, you know, their families and even themselves. So whether or not that's something, it's very culturally based. So they may not express it to you, but they're thinking it. They may think, well, I don't know if that's really true, or I don't know if I would really agree with that. But whether or not they're telling you those things, some kids will and some kids may not. Do you have any questions about children's changes in their thinking? So maybe I'll continue, and then we'll have pause a little later. The next kind of big area of change is social and emotional development. And one of the challenges that children face and people face beginning at this time, I would say, or around this time, is, you know, a sense of identity. And as I mentioned, they're starting to imagine the kind of person they will be, looking around at the people who are like them or not like them, that they want to be. And as they move into these larger schools, because middle and intermediate schools are typically bigger and include more communities that may not be places that they have been to before. So now they have friends from different communities. So it's an opportunity for them to affiliate with people who maybe they find people who are more like them. And I think this kind of goes with the question about sexual identity and gender identity. It can be a really good thing for kids to find other kids who are like them, that maybe in elementary school was a small elementary school and they didn't know a lot of people who were like them. It's not just sexual minorities, but I would say other kinds of identities, that they just didn't see people who were like them. It's a good thing, I think, that when they're in a bigger environment and they can find people to affiliate with and who support them and who they are. So that kind of with the sexual and the gender identity, it has to do also with the maturation that we talked about. The biological maturation is kind of coming together with this sense of identity and who I am. And so, yes, you're going to see kids developing sexual orientations, interests in other people, and then finding identities that they feel fit them well. So it can be kind of nerve-wracking for the kids and the parents, but I think it's a natural progression in a child's development. Somebody mentioned bullying, and middle school is a time when we see an increase in bullying. And this is across the nation. It's not just in Hawaii. So in middle and intermediate schools, there's an increase in bullying. And then in high school, it decreases. And the reasons are related to, the changes that kids are going through, the self and other awareness. So the kind of figuring out where you fit in this hierarchy, and some kids asserting themselves in ways that are not appropriate to put down other people. And so this is something to be aware or cognizant of as a family member, and to talk with your child about. I think what's different, at least for us, and some of you are much younger, so you may have grown up in a digital world, but we didn't. And so that was something that we had to learn to navigate, that bullying and other kinds of problems can exist in the digital world. And so there's some research that shows that girls are more susceptible to cyberbullying, but I think all children using devices now, there is that potential for harmful messages to be posted. And so what should we do about that? I think one of the things that we like to mention is that your children it's not their fault, definitely, to be bullied. And they may not understand that, and they may be embarrassed, or whatever they're feeling, they may not want to express it to you. So you have to be very observant of them to see if you see changes in them that seem sudden and unlikely. For example, say your child was really into basketball, and she loved basketball, and she wanted to go to practice, and she wanted to play basketball. Then suddenly one day she says, I'm not going to basketball, I'm quitting the team. Okay, it's fine to stop something, but that was so sudden and seems so strange. So doesn't mean it's always bullying, but that's a potential, a problem, or doesn't want to go to school anymore. That's very common. If kids don't want to go to school because they're being bullied. So observing some kind of withdrawal or sudden change in mood or interest might be a problem. And so then you would want to talk with your child. You would want to talk to the school. And if you know that your child is being bullied, you need to talk to the school right away. The school's educators are now trained to address bullying, and they have procedures set up. So do you want to say anything else about
About
that?
bullying? I will do that, yeah.
Okay, in a little bit. Okay. Oops. Related to bullying, as I mentioned, is social media. So I think it's very important that families have regular and open discussions with their children about social media, know what kinds of apps they are using, encourage them to show you some apps because they're using the latest things and you may not know. It's fine for you to say that's not appropriate. So just because your kid has a device, it doesn't mean that they can use everything that's available to them. So you have the right to say, no, that's later when you're older, then we can talk about it. You have a right, as we did, to say, when our older son had a phone, this is when kids did Facebook. And then of course, later he said to me, Mom, only old people do Facebook. But when he was doing Facebook and when he was of age to get an account, we said, it's okay for you to have this account, but we have to be your friends. And he was like, oh no, Mom, that's so embarrassing. Well, sorry, you can decide. So remember that we're the adults and we can put those limits on your child's use of devices. Same thing with the devices in their bedroom. Somebody asked about sleep and the light. I think it's very acceptable to say, do not leave the device in the bedroom, because then they're going to be using it and they're saying, I'm going to bed, but they're on their device. So that's another thing that you could consider. And remember that we're all models of behavior. So think about how we use our social media, and do we ever post embarrassing photos of people without their permission? Do we ever do some things that we don't want our kids to do? So we can think about our own practices. And a good website, if you don't already know about it, is called Common Sense Media, where they review different kinds of apps and give suggestions. And it's also a good place to kind of check out different movies if your kids go to movies. Maybe they just want to watch it on their device. But okay, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy.
Okay. Yeah, as Lois was saying before about the bullying, she's also making a comment about how adolescent brain isn't the same as an adult brain in some critical ways. But part of it is the ability to have self-awareness, and suddenly they're able to sort of start evaluating themselves, and there becomes a comparison of where do I stand versus other kids, and so there's a kind of a judgment going on there, especially in middle school. And, who are the popular kids? Who are the unpopular kids? Who do I sit with at what table in the cafeteria? That kind of stuff. So we have this sort of evaluation thing. So even the perpetrators of bullying, the kids who are the bullies themselves, they're coming from a place of anxiety about their own sort of, worthwhileness. And so they put other kids down so they can feel better about themselves in some kind of a negative way, of course. So that's kind of the underlying sort of phenomena that sort of drives bullying. And as the kids' brains develop and they become more mature, then as Lois was saying, it's less of an issue in high school. Although the middle school curriculum and the middle school counselors will know all about this. So it's really important that they get involved in any kind of indication of bullying, that as parents, we've got to let the teachers and the counselors know. Okay, and now somebody mentioned the issue of depression and suicidality, and of course that kind of relates to the idea of being more self-aware and evaluating yourself and the worthwhileness of yourself. And it also connects to that idea of not having fully developed frontal lobes, where your judgment really isn't an adult version of judgment, and so you can be more impulsive and more critical, if you like, without sort of evaluating in a kind of a fair or accurate way. So that's where we come in as parents. Is one thing is to be really careful, as Lois was saying, on little changes or any changes that you see that you pick up. They usually mean something. You don't necessarily know what that means, but it's important, I think, for all of us as parents to check in with them and say, I've noticed this difference. Or even if they don't bring it up, I think it's okay for us to sort of probe a little bit to sort of see what's going on there, as well as just the frequent kind of attitude as parents that we come from a place of understanding instead of judgment. Because sometimes I think we can be disappointed by our kids because, they do bonehead stuff during adolescence, and that's just part of the human condition. We were boneheads during that period of time, and it's just something that it reflects the way we're growing up and our capacities for good judgment, and they're not there yet. And so coming from a place of understanding, I think, rather than a place of judgment is really important. And of course, the unconditional love we have for our kids is going to be very important, so that they get that message that they're loved unconditionally and tremendously, regardless of what grade they come in with. And middle school is not a period where, it's good predictors of what's going to happen later in life as well. It's a time for making errors and to learning from them. And so having that attitude is important. So if a child or adolescent is expressing, looks depressed, looks sad, doesn't seem like they're enjoying things as well, certainly be checking in with that. Counseling may be a very important intervention for that. The two most common things to experience, I think, in psychological adjustment is anxiety about performance, about their self-worth, about their social life, and then depression, where there's more feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, the future won't change, and I'm a no good Nick. So those are worthy things to be addressed with a counselor in a mental health kind of setting, and your school has counselors, of course. Yeah, and there's also a program I wanted to switch to. It's the Hazel program. Let me just admit this person. The Hazel program, the DOE is contracted with this group called Hazel Mental Health to provide mental health services. And it's no cost to families, and it's for public schools. I think most public schools have this. I'm not sure. Not every school, but certainly you can check. So you can have virtual therapy sessions at home, or you can or at school, and they'll have a dedicated room in your school for having these kind of sessions. So that's a great development. And so there's no barrier financially for getting the mental health support that our kids need, that our families need, because usually it's a family issue if it's a kid issue. Okay. Let me see, did not advance again, so why not? Okay. Okay, so here's a slide about the steps for families to request services. And I think you can check in with your school personnel about that. They certainly will be very familiar with it if they have this program, which I hope they do. And again, this can be regular counseling, and these are certified therapists. So I think that's the best. I don't know if this will be posted on a link somewhere, but we can certainly post this slide on a link for you guys to have access to connect with Hazel Mental Health. Okay, so stop there to address any questions you have about social and emotional development, and either Lois and I can field that, hopefully.
One question has been, how do you differentiate between the normal conflicts of adolescence and bullying?
Yeah, right. Good question. Great question. And bullying is in some ways not unusual. I wouldn't want to kind of normalize it or something, but it's very common as an issue in middle school years. And yet there's interpersonal conflicts and criticism going back and forth between peers. And is that bullying, or is that just being critical and having kids be quite sensitive because they're not so confident about their self-worth? And so that's a really great question. It's hard to tease that apart specifically. Bullying, I think, could be more clearly defined when there's a kind of a power difference there, and there's a person constantly sort of and repeatedly being aggressive and critical of a targeted person. Whereas the interaction between kids that happen are sometimes kind of not the best, and they don't have the social skills or the awareness to not be cruel sometimes, and kids can be cruel. It's not, it's to try to understand that rather than judge that. That's part of their developmental process, and they learn how to be more appropriate socially and more fair socially. So bullying is kind of unique in some ways, although reflecting kind of a common theme, if that makes sense. Bullying is absolutely not to be tolerated, and it can be targeted as an intervention, and there's specific programs and things that can be done to protect kids from bullying, and your middle school will know that, your intermediate school will know that. The other kind of interaction stuff that the kids, fight with each other and criticize each other in ways that maybe are unfair or inaccurate or not helpful, that's worth processing in a day-to-day kind of way. I think that's my answer. I don't know, Lois, if you have Lois's. Okay.
Another question that's come up is, what do you do for a child who's exhibiting bullying behavior themselves after being bullied by others?
Right. And modeling is a way kids learn to do stuff. And so maybe the kid who's bullying has learned that from somebody else. And so that can happen. It didn't come from a vacuum. It came from an experience. And absolutely needs to be addressed. And so, it takes kind of a village for this, but the, first stop would be the parents to discuss this and be very clear about what this is all about and why the person is picking on another kid, and sort of exploring that, because it could be that the child feels the bully, the perpetrator, if you like, doesn't feel that good about themselves. And so they feel things are unfair for them. So they project that onto other people to sort of right things. So there's that. But then if it's bullying, then the staff at the school, I think, need to be involved. That would be and it could be therapy and counseling as part of that, because it's pretty significant, and where that's coming from, it's hard to say just in a presentation like this. It'll always be a little bit different for each circumstance, of course. But the common thing is it's quite serious, and needs to be addressed by parents and by professionals, I would say, if it doesn't resolve really quite soon from parental involvement.
It also seems like a wonderful family opportunity to explore empathy.
Yeah.
This child has experienced pain.
Right.
Now, let's talk about how that pain is inflicted on others. It's so important with the rise of narcissism that all of these social media things help to inflate. Really helping families to focus on empathy seems important.
Right. That's a really good point. Good comment. I mean, there is sort of a narcissism that's sort of built into our development and adolescence, because there's so much self-consciousness and so much self kind of evaluation and sometimes condemnation about who we are. And so we're not really thinking of other people and their emotional experience. And so what you say, Deborah, about the emotional experience of the other person, it's really good to sort of have the child consider that. And that's a huge part of growing up, emotionally and socially, is to appreciate how we affect others on that level.
Another question that's come up in the chat that's sort of a larger question is 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are sometimes grouped together in ways in middle school that this questioner wonders, is that problematic for the 6th graders? Are the 6th graders getting drawn into something prematurely? Do you think that the alignment of development is appropriate to have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders together?
Yeah. I'm going to defer to my wife, because she's a developmental psychologist, and she'll know how to tease that apart a little bit more effectively than I can.
Yeah, actually, 6th graders are actually more like 7th and 8th graders. I mean, these are generalities, but in terms of development, it is appropriate, I think, to put 6th, 7th, and 8th graders together, and 9, 10, 11, 12, and then have elementary go up to 5th grade. So in general, I think 6th and 7th and 8th grade, actually that works well. So that's in terms of individuals will be different. And of course, girls typically are developing faster than boys. So the girls are going to be more like the 7th and 8th graders. The boys might be more like the 5th graders. So everybody's different, but in general developmental terms, that is appropriate to start at 6th grade. Okay, I'm going to move on because I see that we have just about 7 minutes or so. So, okay. Okay, so we're just kind of concluding, and these are just some things to think about as you are moving forward to support your children. Just be aware of the changes and challenges as you are doing today. So coming today is really a great step in that direction. Be the eyes and ears for problems. So as we're saying, your child might not always be coming to you saying, I feel like somebody's bullying me, but you notice that something is wrong and then you talk to them about it. Listen with empathy. So I know that a lot of times at this stage of life, the kids do things that parents are upset about, but before we jump in and with our tendency to scold or say, that's not right, listen and try to understand where they're coming from, because we do want them to come to us, because if we scold them, then they'll not come to us. So we have to be empathetic and listen and try to understand. See middle school as a process for learning. It's not a test of worthiness. There's a reason why middle school grades doesn't follow your kids. Your kids will still get into college, even if they don't do super well, or they'll be able to, join a profession they wanted to join, even though they didn't turn in their English homework or get an F like one of our kids did in the first few days of middle school. So it's a practice kind of thing, and it's trying out and exploring. So you want to encourage that exploration, and you also want to encourage their sleep.
So your middle school faculty are experts in this area. The teachers who are attracted to working in middle schools, they just love this age group, and it's so you're not alone, and so you're connected the best you can with the teachers and the counselors in your school. We'd like to finish with some adolescent myths, and that's kind of fun to think about them. So poor self-management doesn't mean that they don't care about themselves or how they're coming across. They probably do very much. Poor grades, as Lois is saying, isn't an indication the kid's not smart. They're just sort of figuring things out, and they're going to make mistakes and hopefully learn from that. You can help sort of see it in that context. Emotional blow-ups, this hysteria that sometimes can happen over apparently little things to us, doesn't mean the situation is as bad as it feels, and sort of communicating that to our kids, I think, is important. Increasing concerns about appearance doesn't mean that your kid's becoming vain or somehow arrogant or something. They're just sort of more aware of how they're kind of presenting and sort of looking at others to see how they should be. If they're sleeping more, it's because they need more sleep. Doesn't mean that they're lazy. Especially the school system seems to truncate the latter part of your sleep episodes. So they're going to be unfortunately tired than they should be. And when they drop you off at the corner before school, it doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means you're embarrassing. Well, Lois and I were. Okay, so that's, you want to finish this?
Yeah. So please go ahead and we'll take any last questions, but we also encourage you to fill out the online evaluation and become a member of Parents for Public Schools. It's a great organization, and it helps to provide services in our community that aren't provided anywhere else, as we advocate for children and their families in public education here. I wanted to thank our sponsors, Aloha Care and Hawaii Schools Federal Credit Union. So thank you. Thanks very much. And if there are any other questions, we can take a few, and we can stay a little longer, but those of you who have to leave, once you fill out the evaluation form, you could leave. Thank you so much.
You look like it goes.
We will save the chat so that we can refer to these questions too and get back to people.
Okay.
I think it's great we're reaching neighbor islands. I mean, this is a really great.
We can also schedule an in-person event for your particular school. So if you liked it and you'd like us to come to you, let us know. Even on the neighbor islands, Aloha Care has provided some funding for travel and coordination of that. So if anyone thinks that this would be great for us to present to your whole school, please reach out to us, and Jessica or someone will get back to you soon.
I've entered the email address. It's very simple, info@ppshi.org, that people can write. And a number of people in the chat have mentioned that they came in late and would really like to either see this repeated or see a copy of it. But it seems like with the number of people who couldn't make it today, the scheduling another session, even some of the people who attended today might want to attend again.
Okay.
Sure.
Are there any questions, Deborah, that you think we should address at this point?
I think that we've gotten most of them, but I do see in the chat a lingering concern about lack of support for kids on things like empathy and suicidal ideation. And it looks like we may want to offer more and collaborate more with other groups. I think the information about Hazel Health is really helpful here. People may want to know what else can we at PPS-HI do to help to show them resources. And maybe we can collaborate with one of the clinics that one of the participants here is working with and explore this further.
Sure. I also want to mention that every school has a social and emotional learning program or should have one. So if you don't know what that is, or if you don't know which one your school selected, I would talk to your teacher or teachers or the administrator to find out about it and find out how family members can be involved, because of course, social emotional learning is happening at home as much as it is at school. So that's another resource for families.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy and Lois. I've seen this presentation at other times, but it just gets better and better. And I feel we're so lucky to have you to help us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
All the best.
We may have folks still filling out the evaluation and joining. But we did have 20 some people, which is good. But so many of the people who'd registered were not here that I know we're going to want to write to all the people who'd registered and see what we might be able to do. But what a wonderful presentation. I just love it when you guys do this.
I do have a log of a few questions that we might want to address later on or send out after. So I'll send that over to the group.
And Yuli, Trisha, Teresa, Leanne, and Gordon, if you have any other questions that you want to just privately ask us, feel free to just put it in the chat to Lois. Let's see, is it under Lois? Yeah, Lois. Yamauchi, co-host.
I think we could also see if we can unmute folks or like allow them to unmute now since we're not.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, if people want to unmute themselves, have the ability to do so.
And Jessica, you put in the link for the forms, right? So Gordon, if you can click that link, you should be able to take the survey, but let us know if you have any issues. Do we have Joyce's email, Margaret or Jessica? Because she had asked about a presentation for transition for middle school at her middle school on Molokai, Kaunanakai. She's a teacher.
If you can recall the name, I can look on our list to see if I have
I'll
her.
send you the name. Thanks.
I see a question from Trisha about parent support group for transgender teens. I think there is a support group that may exist at different schools, but we can find that out, and maybe Trisha, if you let us know what area you're in. We have a former board member with a transgender child, and our board member was very involved in those issues, so we could reach out to her. I know she's quite active in that community.
Can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yep, we can hear.
Okay. Sorry. I'm in the Salt Lake area, Mononua.
Okay, so I think our former board member was at Kaiser. Her child is at Kaiser, but I believe Mililani has a very active group. And yeah, if you can, do we have Trisha's email? Or if you want to send us your email, put your email, you can either directly send it to one of the board members or us, then we can try to get back to you. So if you're in
If she
the
could just send it to info@ppshawaii.org
info, okay,
would be the easiest way to keep track.
okay.
Okay.
And we'll try to follow up, info@pps.org.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I see that Spill the Tea. We are going to that group session already. That's for my team, yeah, that the teens actually go to group session. But I just wondering if there was anything for adults, for the parents.
We can ask our former board member. She may know.
Yeah,
Mm,
she would be the best person at this point, I think.
okay, thank you.
Well, we'll look forward to reading the evaluations and keep fine-tuning what we offer. Thank you, everyone.
so much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.